The war had been over for 11 years, but Sergeant Darius Keld still woke before dawn. Old habits, old wounds, old ghosts. He rose from his cot in the back room of the inn he now owned, the Ember and Anvil, tucked into the belly of Gravenhollow, a town that sat at the edge of the Ashfin marshes like a man who had given up running. He pulled on his boots, the left one first, always the left one first, because his right knee had stopped bending the way it was supposed to after the siege at Ironwall Pass. He was 43 years old. He felt 80. The inn was quiet at this hour. The fire in the common room had burned down to orange coals. The long wooden tables were empty, chairs still upturned from last night's sweep. Outside, the wind moved through the marsh reeds and made a sound like breathing, slow, patient, ancient. Darius didn't need to be awake yet. The first guests wouldn't rise until the 7th bell. His cook, a stout woman named Benna, wouldn't arrive until 6:30. He had time. But sleep, lately, had been a place he couldn't stay. He walked through the common room and into the kitchen, intending to light the bread oven early. Benna had left the dough to rise overnight, covered under a damp cloth on the preparation counter. The morning loaves, 6 of them, round and heavy, would feed the inn's guests and whatever hungry souls wandered in from the road. He pushed open the kitchen door and stopped. There was someone in his kitchen. The figure was crouched near the bread shelf beside the cold pantry, a section separate from the rising dough, where Benna kept the previous day's extra loaves wrapped in cloth for morning toast. The figure had its back to the door. It was small, smaller than Darius expected, and it was moving with a carefulness that spoke not of a practiced thief, but of someone desperately trying not to make a sound. Darius had fought in the Ashfin War. He had stood in shield walls, survived ambushes, crossed burning bridges with arrows in his shoulder. His instincts were not gentle things. His hand moved to the belt hook where, for 11 years of civilian life, he still wore nothing, because there was nothing to wear. No sword, no knife, just a man in a linen shirt and old boots standing in his own kitchen doorway. The figure turned. It was an orc. Young. That was the first thing Darius registered. Young in the way that made the age hard to pin, the way all orc youth looked both ancient and new at once. This one was female, slight-framed for her kind, with the characteristic gray-green skin of the northern marsh bloodlines and tusks that had barely finished growing, still more ivory than yellowed. Her hair was dark and matted. Her clothes were a ruin. A man's coat several sizes too large, belted with rope, the hem torn and muddied past any original color. In her hands, one loaf of bread. She didn't run. That surprised him. She went very still instead, the way prey animals go still when they realize running is already too late. Her eyes, dark amber, wide, fixed on him with an expression he recognized not as defiance, but as the hollow resignation of someone who had already made peace with the worst possible outcome. She thought he was going to hurt her. That thought landed in Darius's chest like a stone in still water. "Put that down," he said. She placed the bread carefully back on the shelf. Her hands were trembling. Darius stepped into the kitchen. He crossed to the cold hearth, took the tinderbox from the hook, and began lighting the kitchen fire. He didn't look at her. "You came in through the back window," he said. It wasn't a question. The latch on that window had been loose for 2 weeks. He'd been meaning to fix it. Silence. "How long have you been in Gravenhollow?" "Nothing." He got the fire going, set a small iron pot to heat, and turned around. She was still standing by the bread shelf, exactly where he'd left her, as if movement itself might trigger something terrible. "I'm not going to call the town watch," he said. "Sit down." She didn't sit down, but something shifted in her expression, a small, cautious recalibration. "Sit," he said again, less sharply this time. She sat, perching on the edge of the 3-legged stool near the hearth, her spine straight as a blade, her eyes tracking him everywhere he moved. Darius cut 2 thick slices from the bread she'd been holding. He set them on the iron pan, let them toast. He poured water into 2 clay cups. He set one in front of her. She looked at the cup. She looked at him. "I'm not poisoning you," he said flatly. "It's water. From the well. Same water I drink." He sat down on the opposite stool. He picked up his cup. He drank. A long moment passed. She picked up her cup and drank. She drank the whole thing in one go, and Darius realized she must have been thirsty for hours, maybe days. She set the cup down and looked away, like she was embarrassed. He slid the toasted bread across to her. She looked at it the way hungry people look at food when they're trying to calculate the cost of accepting it. Eat, he said. She ate both slices, quickly, without looking at him, her jaw working steadily. When she finished, she folded her hands in her lap and waited. What's your name? Darius asked. The silence stretched long enough that he thought she wouldn't answer. Zura, she finally said. Her voice was rougher than he expected, low, slightly hoarse, accented with the flattened vowels of the northern marsh dialect. Darius Keld, he said. I own this inn. I know. You knew whose kitchen you were robbing. Yes. And you came anyway. She said nothing. How long since you've eaten? He asked. Her jaw tightened. 2 days. Darius absorbed that. 2 days. In late autumn, in the marshes, with temperatures dropping into the bone cold at night. Where are you staying? The derelict granary at the edge of the South Road. He knew it. A collapsed hulk of a building, the roof half-caved, holes in the walls that the wind blew straight through. He'd walked past it last week and thought it was empty. Alone? He asked. Another long pause. No, she said. He made her tell him the rest. Not all at once. It came in pieces, the way things always come from people who have learned that sharing information is dangerous. He didn't press. He poured her more water, found a hunk of hard cheese in the cold pantry, sliced it, set it between them. He ate some himself. He waited. Zura had 2 children, twin boys, 6 years old. Their names were Fun and Rook, marsh names, the kind orc families gave children born near water. Their father had died 14 months ago, a fever that moved through the northern settlements fast and ugly. After his death, the settlement where Zura's family had lived for 3 generations was incorporated into the new township surveys, and an administrator from the capital had arrived with documents declaring that the land they'd occupied was now under municipal jurisdiction. There had been a process, supposedly, a formal process through which displaced persons could apply for relocation assistance. Forms to fill, offices to visit, fees to pay, small fees. The administrator had called them, though small was a word that meant different things to people with money and people without. Zura had no money. She had gotten as far as the Gravenhollow district office before she ran out of coin entirely. The clerk had told her to come back when she had the processing fee. That had been 6 weeks ago. Since then, the granary. Odd jobs when she could find them. And in Gravenhollow, as in most towns along the Ashfin border, odd jobs available to an orc woman with 2 young children were not plentiful. People looked at her tusks and her accent, and their expressions shuddered like windows before a storm. She had begged 3 times. Each time, someone had called the town watch. She had stolen twice before tonight. Both times from the market, small things, an apple, a fistful of dried beans. She had not been caught. She had come to the inn tonight because she'd watched it for 2 days, and she'd seen that the back window latch was broken, and she'd thought 1 loaf of bread would last her and the boys 3 days if she was careful. She finished telling him all this in a voice that was entirely flat. No self-pity in it. Just facts, laid out plainly, like inventory. When she was done, she looked at him and waited for his verdict. Darius sat with the silence for a moment. Then he stood up. Go get your boys, he said. She stared at him. It's 4 in the morning, he said. It's cold. There's a room upstairs, the one at the end of the hall, the small one. It doesn't have a proper window, just a shutter, but it has a bed and a pallet and the chimney runs through the wall so it stays warm. He paused. Go get them and bring them here. Zura hadn't moved. Her expression was the most complicated thing he'd seen in years, suspicion and exhaustion, and something fragile underneath both of those things. Why? She asked. It was a fair question. Darius thought about it honestly, the way he'd learned to think about things since the war, bluntly, without decoration. Because I have an empty room, he said. And 2 boys shouldn't sleep in a ruined granary in October. And after that, she asked. What do you want for it? Nothing tonight, he said. We'll talk about after that in the morning. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. But it's the truth. He looked at her steadily. You came into my kitchen at 4 in the morning, and you stood there, and you didn't run, and you didn't lie to me when I asked you questions. I'm returning the courtesy. Another silence. Then Zura stood up. She was taller standing than she'd seemed crouching, and when she straightened her spine, there was something in her bearing that was, despite everything, not remotely defeated. She met his eyes. The bread, she said. I'll pay for it. You don't owe me for toast. The bread I came to steal. I'll pay for it. Darius looked at her for a moment. All right, he said. She nodded once, turned, and walked out the back door into the dark. He had the room ready by the time she came back. He heard them before he saw them, soft footsteps on the back path, and then a small voice. Is this it? And then Zura's quiet, yes, hush. He was in the hallway when the back door opened. The boys were small and identical in the way of twins who haven't yet grown differently from each other. They had their mother's dark hair and amber eyes and the northern complexion, and they were both wearing every piece of clothing they owned, layered over each other in a way that made them look slightly spherical. The one on the left, Fawn, he would learn, had a wooden carving in his fist, some small animal worn smooth from handling. The one on the right, Rook, was asleep on his feet, his head drooping against Zura's arm. They both looked up at Darius with large, wary eyes. He'd been a soldier. He wasn't soft with children as a rule. He didn't know the right things to say to small people. He crouched down to their level anyway. There's a room upstairs with a warm wall, he said. You'll sleep better than you've slept in a while. Finn studied him carefully. You're very big, he said. Yes. Mama says big people are not always safe people. Darius glanced up at Zura. Your mother's right, he said. But some big people are safe. You'll have to decide for yourself which kind I am. He stood. Upstairs. Second door from the staircase, end of the hall. They were asleep within minutes. Both boys on the bed, Zura on the floor pallet. She'd refused to let it be the other way around. And when Darius checked the room an hour later on his way to start the bread oven properly, there was nothing to see but the slow rise and fall of three people who needed sleep badly. He stood in the doorway for a moment. 11 years since Iron Wall. Since the last time he'd been responsible for anything beyond flower orders and leaky window latches. Since the world had asked anything of him that mattered. He went downstairs and started the bread. Benna arrived at 6:30 and found him already knee-deep in the morning work. She was a broad woman with a gray-streaked braid and the unshakable equanimity of someone who had seen everything twice. You started without me, she said, hanging up her coat. Window latch needs fixing, he said. Can you get Torvin the carpenter to come this week? I can send word. She surveyed the kitchen with professional attention. Bread started. Water's heated. You sleep at all? Some. She gave him a look that said she didn't believe him, but she let it go, because she always let it go. There are guests in the end room, he said. The small one. A woman and 2 children. Benna raised an eyebrow. Checked in late. Something like that. They'll want breakfast when they wake. Full breakfast. How are they paying? A fair question. The Ember and Anvil wasn't a charity house. Darius had kept it running for 8 years on thin margins and careful accounting. He wasn't a wealthy man. We'll work that out, he said. Benna regarded him for a long moment with the expression she reserved for things she understood better than he thought she did. Right? She said, and tied on her apron, and went to work. Zura came downstairs at the 8th bell. She'd washed, he could tell, and braided her hair back, and her coat was off. She moved through the common room carefully, like someone navigating a space that might still belong to danger, and she found him at the corner table where he did his ledger work. He gestured at the chair across from him. She sat. The boys, he asked. Still sleeping. Something crossed her face, a small relief. They haven't slept like that in weeks. Darius set down his pen. I have a proposition, he said. A practical one. You can refuse it. She waited. Benna, my cook, is excellent, but she's also 61 years old, and her back has been bad since spring. I need someone to handle the heavy kitchen work, the lifting, the water hauling, the firekeeping, the scrubbing. I also need someone in the evenings to clear tables and carry trays, since I've been doing it myself, and I'm bad at it. He paused. The room is small, but it's warm. I'll feed you and the boys, 3 meals, same as guests. And I'll pay you for the hours worked. He named a number. Not lavish, but real. How long? Zura asked. I haven't thought past winter, he said honestly. Winter's the problem right now. After that, we'll see. She looked at the table. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at him. I'm not a charity case, she said. I know. That's why I'm offering you wages. The bread I stole. You can pay it back from the first week's wages if it matters to you. It doesn't matter to me. Her jaw worked. Why are you doing this? He'd been sitting with that question since 4 o'clock this morning. I've been thinking about that, he said. And here's what I have. I spent 12 years in the Ashfin War. I fought orc soldiers at the border. Good fighters. Honest fighters, mostly, better than some men I knew. The war ended. We all went home. And then the winning side, we rewrote the surveys and sent clerks with fees, and that's not something I can fix. But I have a warm room and a broken window latch and a shortage of kitchen labor. He met her eyes. That's all I have. It's not justice. It's just what I have. Zura was quiet for a long moment. I work hard, she said finally. I imagine so. I don't accept pity. Good. I'm not offering any. Another silence. Fun and Rook will need to be occupied during the days, she said. They're not old enough to be left alone. They're also, she paused, a great deal. Despite himself, the corner of Darius's mouth moved. Benna has grandchildren, he said. She'll have opinions about what to do with them. Something happened in Zura's face then, something careful and guarded, and very tired, slowly letting go of its grip. Just a little. Just enough. All right, she said. Fun and Rook came downstairs an hour later in a state of tremendous curiosity about everything. Rook, who did not stop talking for more than 30 seconds at a stretch, had an immediate and detailed series of questions about the mounted fish on the common room wall, the mechanics of the fireplace bellows, the depth of the ale barrels, and whether the large gray cat sleeping on the window ledge was mean or friendly. Mean, said Darius, who was carrying kegs from the cellar. Rook immediately went to pet the cat. I said mean, said Darius. He looks friendly, said Rook. The cat, whose name was Siege and who had never in 8 years permitted anyone to touch him, sat completely still while Rook scratched his ears with the absolute confidence of a child who expected the world to cooperate. Siege began to purr. Darius set down the keg and stared. Huh, he said. Benna, as predicted, had opinions. She took one look at the boys, said something under her breath that sounded like, finally, some life in this place, and by midday had assigned Rook the task of fetching wood chips for the oven, a job he performed with tremendous noise and enthusiasm, and given Finn the quieter task of sorting dried herbs into bundles, which he did with a serious precision that she declared better than most adults I've met. Zura worked without complaint. She hauled water, scrubbed the flagstones, stacked the heavy firewood, reorganized the cold pantry in a way that was demonstrably more logical than the way it had been before, and when the lunchtime crowd began filling the tables, she moved through them with trays steadily, efficiently, without quite smiling, but without the hollow wariness either. Darius watched all of this from a distance. He wasn't a man given to signs or meanings. He'd seen enough of the world's machinery to know it wasn't designed to be poetic. Things happened. Some were bad, some were not bad, and you worked with what you had. But standing at the end of the bar at noon, watching the common room full and warm and loud, watching Benna boss the boys around with undisguised pleasure, watching Zura set down a tray at the table by the window and tuck a loose braid behind her ear without thinking. It felt like something. He wasn't sure what. Something that had been missing for a long time, maybe. Some quality of occupied space. Some sense that the inn was no longer just a building he maintained, but a place where things happened. He picked up a rag and went to wipe down the bar, because that was the useful thing to do. That evening, after the guests were fed and the boys were put to bed, Rook requiring 3 attempts and a stern word from his mother, Finn going quietly and immediately, Zura came and sat at the corner table again with a cup of water. Darius joined her. They didn't talk much. He read through his supply orders. She mended a tear in Fun's coat with thread she'd apparently been carrying in her pocket the entire time. The fire settled. Outside, the marsh reeds moved in the wind. You were at Ironwall, she said eventually. Not a question. He looked up. How do you know? The way you walk. The knee. She kept her eyes on her sewing. My father fought there too. On the other side. He sat with that. Did he come home? Darius asked. Yes. A pause. He died 3 years later. Marsh fever. I'm sorry. He would have found this. She gestured at the table, the room, the two of them, strange. Probably, said Darius. Not bad strange, she said carefully. Just strange. He understood what she meant. I have a bottle of proper wine somewhere, he said. From before I stopped having reasons to open it. Zura glanced at him. Is this a reason? He thought about it. I think so, he said. He got the bottle. Over the following weeks, the Ember and Anvil changed in ways that were hard to quantify exactly, but unmistakable. The cold pantry was always organized now. The firewood was always stacked before nightfall. The tables in the common room were cleared faster, the floors swept more thoroughly, and there was almost always something hot on the kitchen counter at odd hours because Zura cooked the way some people talk. Constantly, purposefully, because stopping felt unnatural. She made marsh-spiced bread, a northern recipe, heavier and darker than the standard loaves, with seeds pressed into the crust. The first time she set one out on the common room counter for guests to cut at, Darius expected resistance. Gravenhollow was not a town that embraced novelty. The bread was gone in 40 minutes. A trader from the South Road asked if he could buy a second loaf to take with him. That's her recipe, Darius told him. You'd have to ask her. Zura, who had overheard, looked at him from the kitchen doorway with an expression that was probably not a smile, but was working in that direction. Fun, meanwhile, revealed himself to be an unexpectedly sharp child. He had taught himself to read, imperfectly but genuinely, from a religious almanac he'd found in the granary, of all things, and he spent his free hours at the corner table with whatever printed material he could find, sounding out words with a patient intensity that made Darius feel something he couldn't quite name. One afternoon, Darius sat across from him. "What are you reading?" he asked. Finn pushed the page toward him. It was a shipping manifest, one of Darius's old supply orders, apparently left on the table. "What does sundry mean?" Finn asked. "It means various things that aren't worth listing individually." Finn considered this. "That seems like a lazy way to write." "It is," said Darius. "Why do people do it?" "Because writing everything out takes time. But then you don't know what you have." "That," said Darius, "is an accurate criticism of many supply orders." Finn nodded gravely and made a note in the margin of the manifest with a charcoal stick. Rook, meanwhile, had made friends with essentially everyone in Gravenhollow. This happened so naturally and so quickly that Darius only noticed when he realized that 3 regular customers now asked specifically after Rook when they came in, and that the old woman who sold candles from the market stall 2 doors down had started leaving a wrapped piece of something sweet at the inn's back door on alternate days with a note reading for the small, noisy one. Rook accepted this as his natural due. "Everyone likes me," he told Darius one morning with complete sincerity. "Almost everyone," Darius said. "Who doesn't like me?" "Siege." Rook looked at the cat, who was currently asleep on Rook's folded coat in the corner. "Siege loves me," said Rook. Darius could not refute this. 2 months in, on an evening in late November when the first real cold had come down from the north and the marsh had begun to freeze at its edges, Zura came to find him in the cellar where he was doing the quarterly stock count. "There's someone here," she said. "From the district office." He set down his ledger. The man at the corner table was a clerk type, mid-30s, neat coat, the particular expression of someone performing official function. He had papers. He introduced himself as an assistant to the surveying administrator and explained that there had been a review of certain pending relocation cases, and that one Zura of Fenwald settlement, he checked his notes, had an outstanding application that had been flagged as administratively incomplete. He looked up. "Are you the applicant?" Zura stood by the bar. She had her arms at her sides, and her face was very still. "Yes," she said. "There's a fee outstanding," said the clerk. He named the amount, the same small fee that had been named 6 weeks ago, the fee that had been the size of a wall. Darius reached under the bar without saying anything and put the coins on the table. The clerk blinked. "Are you?" "A business associate," said Darius. "Process the application." The clerk looked at the coins. He looked at Darius. He wrote something in his ledger. "The processing will take 4 to 6 weeks," he said. "She'll receive a formal residency classification, which will allow access to the municipal work registry, the school enrollment system." "Thank you," said Darius. The clerk left. The common room was quiet except for the fire. Zura hadn't moved. "I'll pay you back," she said. "I know. That was—" She stopped. Started again. "You didn't have to do that. I know that too." She turned and looked at him, and the expression on her face was something that required more time to understand than a single glance could give, layered and complicated, and, underneath all of it, something that was trying carefully to become trust. "Darius," she said. "Zura." A pause. "Thank you," she said. He picked up his ledger. "The cellar count isn't going to finish itself," he said, because he was not a man who knew how to receive things gracefully. She made a sound that was, definitively this time, a laugh. "The school enrollment came through in early spring." The morning Fun and Rook left for their first day, Fun grave and prepared, Rook loudly speculating about whether there would be other children who liked him. Zura stood at the inn doorway and watched them go down the road until they turned the corner. She stood there for a moment after they disappeared. Darius was behind her, carrying a crate. "They'll be fine," he said. "I know they'll be fine." She turned around. Her eyes were bright, not quite crying, but the neighboring country. "I know. Benna's making the good porridge," he said. "In case that helps." She laughed again, and this time it was easier, the way things get easier when they've had practice. She went inside. Darius followed. The Ember and Anvil opened for the morning. The fire was lit, and outside in Gravenhollow, 2 boys walked to school for the first time, and the marsh reeds bent in the spring wind, and the world was not fixed, and not fair, and not finished. But this part of it was warm, and that, for now, was enough.